I Am Malala, the girl who stood up for education and was shot by the Taliban, by Malala Yousafzai with Christina Lamb. Introduction. Imagine a school bus, bumping along a dusty road. It's a white Toyota truck, the kind they call a Dyna, crammed with laughing, chattering girls, their exam folders held tight to their chests. Inside, the air is hot and sticky. Plastic sheeting, yellowed with dust, covers the windows, but through the open back, you can see a small patch of blue sky. The girls are talking about school, about their dreams, about Justin Bieber. One of them is a 15-year-old girl with a quick smile and a love for books. Suddenly, the van stops. A young man with a handkerchief over his face steps onto the tailboard and leans in. The laughter dies. The air grows cold. He holds up a black pistol. "Who is Malala?" he demands. No one speaks. But in that silent, terrifying moment, every eye in the bus turns to one girl. The only girl whose face is not covered. She squeezes her friend's hand. And then, 3 shots ring out. That question, "Who is Malala?" is what the world would come to ask. And the answer would echo from the mountains of Pakistan to the halls of the United Nations. It's a question we're going to explore today, as we dive into the incredible story of Malala Yousafzai. This isn't just a book about a girl who was shot. It's the story of a girl who refused to be silenced. It's a story about a father who, in a land where sons are celebrated with rifle fire, cherished his daughter and believed she could be as free as a bird. And it's a story about the beautiful, troubled valley she called home, a paradise that was slowly stolen by fear. By the end of our journey today, you will understand how a quiet, book-loving girl from the Swat Valley in Pakistan became a global symbol for peace and education. You'll discover the incredible power that lies within a single voice when it dares to speak the truth. And you will see that the fight for education is never just about books and classrooms. It is a fight for the future of the world. This is a story of courage so profound it will change the way you see your own life, your own education, and your own voice. Book summary. Our story begins not with a bang, but with a quiet disappointment. In the Swat Valley of Pakistan, a beautiful land of waterfalls and green fields, the birth of a son is an occasion for celebration. But when Malala was born, the villagers only commiserated with her mother. "A daughter," they would say, with a sigh. But Malala's father, a man named Swat Yousafzai, was different. He was a poet, a dreamer, and an educator. He looked into his newborn daughter's eyes and fell in love. In a culture that traced its family trees through the male line for generations, Swat took the pen, drew a line from his own name, and proudly wrote Malala. He named her after Malala of My Wand, a legendary Pashtun heroine, a Joan of Arc figure who rallied the Afghan army against the British. It was a name that meant grief-stricken, but for Swat, it was a name of strength and courage. He would often tell people, "I know there is something different about this child." He believed his daughter would be free as a bird. Malala grew up inside the walls of the school her father founded, the Kashal School. For her, school wasn't just a building, it was her playground, her world. Before she could even talk, she would toddle into empty classrooms and pretend to teach. While other girls in her village were being raised to cook, clean, and prepare for marriage, Malala was raised among books and ideas. Her father's school was her inheritance. The Swat Valley she grew up in was, for a time, a paradise. People called it the Switzerland of the East. Tourists came from all over the world to see its snow-capped mountains and ancient Buddhist statues. But this paradise had a shadow. Swat was a deeply traditional Pashtun society, governed by a code of honor called Pashtunwali. This code dictated many things, but especially the roles of women. Women were to remain in purdah, secluded from public view. They couldn't go out without a male relative, even if that relative was a 5-year-old boy. Malala saw this world around her, but her father had given her a different vision. This peaceful, beautiful world began to crack in 2005. A devastating earthquake struck the region, killing more than 70,000 people. In the chaos and devastation that followed, with the government slow to respond, new faces appeared in the valley. They were men from religious groups, offering aid, building shelters, and burying the dead. They were organized and efficient, and people were grateful. But these men brought more than just food and blankets. They brought an idea. They preached that the earthquake was a punishment from God. A warning. It was a punishment, they said, for all the UN Islamic behaviors, the music, the dancing, the movies, and the education of girls. Among these new voices, one grew louder than all the others. His name was Maulana Fazlullah, a charismatic young man with a limp and a fiery voice. He started an illegal radio station, which everyone soon called Mullah FM. Every night, his voice would crackle through the radios in every home, in every village. At first, he sounded reasonable. He was an Islamic reformer, he said. He instructed people on the proper way to pray. He told men to grow their beards and give up smoking. He spoke against corruption. Many people, including Malala's own devout mother, liked what they heard. They were tired of the corrupt politicians and the slow, broken justice system. Fazlullah promised a better way, a purer way, the implementation of Sharia, or Islamic law. The women of Swat were his most devoted listeners. They donated their money and their gold jewelry, believing they were serving God. But slowly, the message began to change. The radio became a tool of fear. Fazlullah began denouncing sinful acts. Listening to music was forbidden. Watching movies was forbidden. Dancing was forbidden. And soon, he turned his attention to schools. He began by condemning the school uniforms, calling them un-Islamic. Then he started to praise girls, by name, who had dropped out of school. Miss So-and-so has stopped going to school and will go to heaven, he would announce. Girls who continued their education, he called buffaloes and sheep. For Malala, this was personal. He was attacking her father's life's work. He was attacking her world. Fazlullah's followers, who now called themselves the Taliban, were no longer just preachers. They were armed men who patrolled the streets. They burned huge piles of TVs, CDs, and DVDs in public squares. They closed down barbershops because shaving was un-Islamic. They threatened women in the market who weren't wearing a full burqa. They became a shadow government, and the real government, the police, and the army, seemed to do nothing. It was as if they were afraid, or perhaps, as some whispered, they were secretly supporting them. Then, the killings began. Bodies started appearing in the main square in Mingora, the largest city in Swat. It became known as the Bloody Square. A dancer named Shabana was dragged from her home and her body, riddled with bullets, was left on display as a warning. People were terrified into silence. But Malala and her father were not silent. Ziauddin used his position as the head of the Association of Private Schools to speak out. He gave interviews, he attended seminars, he challenged the Taliban's twisted version of Islam. He knew it was dangerous. People warned him, "You'll be next," but he believed that silence was the same as surrender. He would often say, "If you want to resolve a dispute, the very first thing is to speak the truth. The truth will abolish fear." And as he spoke, his young daughter was listening. One day, a friend of her father's from the BBC called. He was looking for a teacher or a schoolgirl to write an anonymous diary about life under the Taliban. He wanted the world to see the human side of the conflict. A few girls were asked, but their families were too afraid. It was too risky. When Malala overheard her father talking about it, she didn't hesitate. "Why not me?" she asked. And so, at just 11 years old, Malala began her secret life as a writer. She was given a pen name, Gul Makai, which means cornflower, after another Pashtun heroine. Every night, the BBC correspondent would call her, and she would tell him about her day, her fears, her dreams, the things she saw on the streets. He would write it down, and it would be published on the BBC Urdu website. Her first entry, titled "I Am Afraid," began, "I had a terrible dream yesterday with military helicopters and the Taliban. I have had such dreams since the launch of the military operation in Swat." She wrote about hiding her school books under her shawl, about hearing the sound of shelling at night, about the fear that hung over everything. But she also wrote about her determination. "They can stop us from going to school," she said, "but they can't stop us from learning." The Diary of Gul Makai became a sensation. People all over Pakistan, and then the world, were reading this young girl's words. Nobody knew who she was, but her voice was a small, bright light in a dark valley. She was giving a face to the millions of girls who were being denied an education. In late 2008, the Taliban made their final decree. As of January 15, 2009, all girls' schools in Swat must close. Malala was devastated. How can they stop more than 50,000 girls from going to school in the 21st century? She wondered. The day her school closed, she felt as if she had lost everything. But even then, she didn't stop speaking. Her anonymous diary had given her courage. She started giving interviews, this time as Malala. Her face, still that of a child, began appearing on television. She spoke with a wisdom and clarity far beyond her years. "How dare the Taliban take away my basic right to education?" she asked in one interview. She spoke directly to the camera, to the world. And the world was beginning to listen. This public profile, however, came at a great cost. The more she spoke, the more of a target she became. Threats against her and her father intensified. They found notes left on their gate. Anonymous letters were distributed, calling her father's school a center of vulgarity and obscenity. Friends begged him to be quiet, to leave Swat. But he refused. "I cannot leave," he would say. "I am a tree that has grown in this soil. My roots are here." Malala, too, was afraid. She started having nightmares. She would check the locks on the doors and windows every night before she went to bed. She would pray, asking God for protection. She wondered what she would do if a terrorist stopped her on the way home. She imagined herself pleading with him, "Okay, shoot me, but first listen to me. What you are doing is wrong. I'm not against you personally, I just want every girl to go to school." She was just a teenager, but she was preparing herself for a battle most of us can't even imagine. In 2009, the Pakistani army finally launched a major military operation to drive the Taliban out of Swat. For 3 months, Malala and her family became IDPs, internally displaced persons. They fled their home with nearly 2 million other people, the largest exodus in Pashtun history. When they finally returned, Mingora was a ghost town. The streets were silent, the walls pockmarked with bullet holes. Her beloved school had been occupied by soldiers. They found bullet casings on the floor and anti-Taliban slogans scrawled on the whiteboards. Slowly, life began to return to a fragile normality. The Taliban were gone, at least from the main towns. Schools reopened. Malala, now a young teenager, went back to her classes, her friends, and her friendly rivalry with her classmate Malka-e-Noor for the top spot in the class. But though the fighting had stopped, the threats had not. The Taliban were no longer a visible force, but their mentality, as her father called it, was everywhere. He described it as a private Talibanization. The threats became more specific, targeting those who, like him and Malala, continued to speak out. In August 2012, Ziauddin's close friend and fellow activist, Zahid Khan, was shot in the face on his way to prayers. He survived, but the message was clear. Everyone told Ziauddin, "You are next." Malala's mother was terrified. She started insisting that Malala take the bus to and from school, even though it was only a 5-minute walk. And that brings us back to that Tuesday morning, October 9, 2012. The middle of school exams. Malala had stayed up late the night before, studying for her Pakistan studies paper. The day before, she'd been upset about getting a single question wrong on her physics exam. Such a small thing. Such a normal teenage thing to worry about. That day on the bus, after the exam, she was happy, chatting with her best friend, Maniba. She was thinking about the revision she needed to do for the next day. She didn't see the young men step into the road. She didn't have a chance to answer their question. The last thing she remembered was not the sound of bullets. It was the rhythmic chop, chop, chop of a man severing the heads of chickens in the market, and the drip, drip, drip of blood onto the dirty street. When the shots rang out, Malala slumped forward onto Maniba, blood pouring from her left ear. The first bullet had entered just above her left eye, tunneled down the side of her face, and lodged in her shoulder. 2 other girls, Shazia and Kainat, were also hit by the other 2 bullets. What followed was a journey between life and death. Her father, hearing the news, rushed to the local hospital. He found his daughter on a trolley, her eyes closed, her hair spread out around her. "My daughter, you are my brave daughter, my beautiful daughter," he whispered, kissing her forehead. The bullet had missed her brain, but only just. As it traveled, it had shattered bone, and the fragments had caused her brain to swell dangerously. She was airlifted by helicopter to a military hospital in Peshawar. Her father and her headmistress, Madam Mariam, went with her. Her mother watched from the roof of their house, lifting her scarf to the sky and praying, "God, I entrust her to you." In Peshawar, a brilliant Pakistani neurosurgeon named Colonel Hunaid made a brave decision. To save her life, he had to perform a craniectomy, removing a piece of her skull to give her swelling brain room to expand. He stored the piece of bone in her abdomen to keep it sterile. It was an operation that lasted for 5 hours. For those 5 hours, her parents waited, caught between hope and despair. Malala survived the surgery, but she was not out of danger. Her condition was critical. The world was now watching. Offers to treat her poured in from all over the globe. But the decision was not up to her family, it was up to the Pakistani army. It was 2 British doctors, who happened to be in Pakistan for a different reason, who ultimately convinced the army chief that she needed to be moved. They warned that without the specialized care available in the UK, she could suffer permanent brain damage, or worse. And so, in the early hours of Monday, October 15, 6 days after she was shot, Malala was flown out of Pakistan on a private jet provided by the royal family of the United Arab Emirates. It was equipped as a flying hospital. Her father had made the agonizing decision to stay behind. His wife and sons had no passports, and he could not leave them alone and vulnerable. He entrusted his daughter's life to a British doctor he had only just met. Malala woke up on October 16 in a hospital in Birmingham, England. She was thousands of miles from home. A tube in her neck prevented her from speaking. Her vision was blurry. She had no idea where she was, or what had happened. Her first thoughts were a storm of questions. Where am I? Where is my father? Am I dead? She was terrified. Using an alphabet board, the first words she spelled out were father and country. She was also worried about money. "My father has no money," she wrote in a notebook. "Who will pay for all this?" She didn't know that the world was paying attention. She didn't know that thousands of letters and gifts were arriving at the hospital, addressed simply to the girl shot in the head, Birmingham. She didn't know that a petition in her name, demanding education for all children, had gathered millions of signatures. The Taliban had tried to silence her, but they had only made her voice louder. They had made her global. 10 long days passed before her family could join her. When they finally walked into her hospital room, she couldn't stop crying. For all the pain, all the fear, she hadn't shed a tear until that moment. Seeing them, she knew she would be okay. But they were shocked by what they saw. Her long hair had been shaved off. The left side of her face was paralyzed. The facial nerve had been severed by the bullet's shockwave. She couldn't smile. Her father, looking at the lopsided grimace that appeared when she tried, lamented to his wife, "The Taliban are very cruel. They have snatched her smile." But Malala's spirit was unbroken. "It doesn't matter if I can't smile or blink properly," she told her mother. "I'm still me, Malala. The important thing is God has given me my life." What followed was a long, painful, but ultimately miraculous recovery. She had more surgeries, one to repair the facial nerve, which took over 8 hours, and another to fit a custom-made titanium plate in her head to replace the missing piece of her skull. They also fitted her with a cochlear implant to restore the hearing in her left ear. Slowly, painstakingly, she learned to walk again. She did facial exercises every day in front of a mirror. And bit by bit, movement returned to her face. Her smile came back. Her world had changed forever. She was no longer just a schoolgirl from Swat. She was a symbol. But inside, she was still Malala. She missed her friends, her school, even the annoying arguments with her best friend Maniba. She missed the rooftops of Mingora, the smell of the stream, the taste of her mother's cooking. But she also knew that her life now had a purpose. I had been spared for a reason, she realized, to use my life for helping people. On her 16th birthday, 9 months after she was shot, Malala stood before the United Nations in New York. She wore a pink shalwar kameez and one of Benazir Bhutto's white shawls, which had been given to her by Benazir's children. She looked out at the vast hall filled with world leaders and delegates, but she spoke to the world. "Let us pick up our books and our pens," she said, her voice clear and strong. "They are our most powerful weapons. One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world." The Taliban had asked, "Who is Malala?" This was her answer. Commentary. When you finish a story like Malala's, it's easy to focus on the extremes, the incredible violence, the miraculous survival, the global fame. But if we do that, I think we miss the most important part of her message. The real power of I Am Malala isn't just in the extraordinary events, it's in the ordinary beginnings. This story is, at its heart, about a father's love. In a society that so often diminishes the value of a daughter, Ziauddin Yousafzai saw in Malala not a burden, but a blessing. He didn't just allow her to go to school, he cultivated her mind, encouraged her voice, and treated her as an equal. He gave her the one thing that no extremist ideology can ever truly conquer: the belief in her own worth. That is where Malala's courage was born. It wasn't in defiance of her upbringing, it was a direct result of it. And that brings us to the central theme of the book, the transformative power of education. For Malala, education was never just about memorizing formulas or dates. It was about learning to think. It was about understanding the world, questioning injustice, and finding the words to articulate a better future. The Taliban, and extremists like them everywhere, are not afraid of guns. They are afraid of books. They are afraid of a girl with a book, because a girl with an education is a girl who can think for herself. She is a girl who cannot be controlled. She is a threat to any system built on ignorance and fear. Malala's story shows us that courage is not the absence of fear. She was afraid. She had nightmares. She checked the locks on the doors. But she continued to go to school. She continued to speak. Courage, her story teaches us, is feeling the fear and doing the right thing anyway. It's a choice we make, not a quality we are born with. So, what can we take from this incredible journey? How can we apply these lessons to our own lives, which, thankfully, are so different from hers? First, let's value our own education. The next time you feel the weight of homework or the boredom of a lecture, take a moment to remember Malala and the millions of girls like her who have risked everything for the simple privilege of sitting in a classroom. See your education not as a requirement, but as a superpower. It is the tool with which you will build your future and shape the world. Don't take it for granted. Second, find your voice. Malala's journey began with a small, anonymous diary. She didn't start by addressing the United Nations. She started by speaking her truth, quietly at first, and then with growing confidence. You don't have to solve the world's problems to make a difference. What is the one thing in your life, your school, or your community that you believe is unjust? What is the one thing you wish you could change? Find the courage to speak about it. Your voice has more power than you know. Finally, remember the power of one. One father who believed in his daughter. One teacher who kept the school open. One girl who refused to be silenced. The Taliban, in their attempt to erase one voice, ended up amplifying it for the entire world to hear. It's a profound reminder that our individual actions, no matter how small they seem, can create ripples of change that travel farther than we could ever imagine. That was a journey through I Am Malala by Malala Yousafzai. We've touched on the major moments of her incredible story, but let me be honest with you, a summary, no matter how detailed, is like looking at a photograph of a beautiful landscape. You can see the outlines, the colors, but you can't feel the sun on your skin or the wind in your hair. The real magic of this book is in the small details, in the quiet moments of family life, in the raw emotion of her words. This summary is your map, but the treasure is found by taking the journey yourself. If her story has moved you, if her courage has inspired you, I urge you to pick up a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning what happened, it's an experience that will stay with you long after you've turned the final page. You can find a link to the book in the description below. And if you found this summary valuable, and you want to continue exploring the ideas that have shaped the world's most successful and influential people, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Let's keep learning, and let's keep growing, together.